Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In the last video, we talked about the different SQL command categories where we mentioned DDL, DCL, DML, and TCL, and each one being data definition language, data manipulation language, data control language, and transaction control language. So today we'll continue with the SQL commands in the DDL and in the DML category. Let's get into the computer and get started. So last time we created a database using the create command, and we created it in our server without any table. So today we'll be creating a table inside this database, and would also be performing other operations using the other SQL commands that we have mentioned before, so that we know how to use them and when to use them. So instead of create database in this case, we want to create a table. So we say create table. And then what do we want to name our table? Let's say we are creating a department table. We name it department. And then we open a bracket. What do you need in your table? You need the attributes in your table. So you have to specify the attributes for your table. So in this case, we are specifying our attributes. And let's say we have department ID. So I will name it det ID. What kind of constraints or what kind of data type? First, you have to define your data type. Det ID would be an integer. So I would write int. Don't forget, I've told you before, SQL Server is not case sensitive for the most part. There are some cases where you get to and it gets case sensitive. That's why I said for the most part. But usually when you're on your server, mainly it is not case sensitive, except you're using some cloud services that are actually case sensitive. But we are not there yet, so you can write however you like. So I have my department ID and I want it to be the primary key. This is the key I'll be connecting to other tables with or to other factories. So this is going to be a dimension table. I've mentioned this before in previous videos. If you don't understand what that is, kindly check one of my previous videos and you would understand perfectly. So the constraint will be that this will be a primary key. And once I state that this is the primary key, this column cannot be null and will have to be unique. So two values cannot repeat in this table. So that's what it means to be a primary key. But after this video, I'm going to create a different video that explains different kinds of constraints you can have on your column in. So I want to create department ID and let's say department name. So department name would be varchar and it's going to be, let's say 20. So what this means is that when you use varchar, you can use different ways to define your string in your database. So when you use varchar, you are saying that this is a variable character or is a variable text. So I stored mine as varchar 20. So you can also store yours as whatever size you want it to be, depending on how you anticipate the name of your, how big you anticipate the name of your department to be. But when you use varchar, it's allowing your system to store it in such a way that even when you don't have up to 20 characters, you can still store it in that number of characters. So instead of it taking, for example, a unit of space where it is 20, if it is maybe 3, for example, out of 20, it will store it as that 3. If it was, it will store it as 10. And if it was all the 20 spaces that you have created using this that you have, then it's going to store it that way. We also have other variations like char, which also does the same thing, but char doesn't give you variables. If you store it as char 20, even if your character is 3 or 4, it will still give the space of 20 for that character. That's what char is. And then you have the nchar and the nvarchar. The nchar allows you to create or store in different other languages. While char and varchar are for English language, nchar and nvarchar, you can use them with other languages. So the only difference is that you have the n in front when you're using other languages, and then you have the var, meaning variable, in front when you want it to be able to store based on the size of whatever you input and not based on the defined size that you have given, though you cannot store above the defined size. So usually people use varchar 100 where for names and etc. because when you store it, it speaks just the size of your inputs to store it, and it doesn't essentially have to use the whole 100 spaces for your character. I hope you understand that. Okay, let's get back to our table creation. So this is my table creation query, and I would run this to create a table in. Now we have created this table in master instead of us to create it on another database. Actually, I wanted to create this table on data with joy, the database that we created in the last class. But now I created it in master because I did not change the database I want to use. It's either I change the database here or I use a query here that says use the database name. So if I say data with joy and I run this, so to pick the database I want to create my table in, I can either use the use function or the use statement, or I come in here and I pick the actual database I want. I wanted data with joy. So if I run this, though master is picked here, and if I run this, it would create this table on data with joy. We know that I had first created it on master, but I wanted it on this database. So if I come down here, you see that my DBO department is there. But if I don't want to keep using this, I can easily pick data with joy here and then do whatever operation I want to perform on it. So once you have created your table, you have an empty table and there are no columns at all. There are no values in the column, there are columns because you have created your column. You see that the department ID as a constraint is the primary key, so definitely it cannot be null and it has to be unique. And also we have the department name, which is a string. So what we have to do next is to insert data into our table. So if you want to do that, when you're using create, you have to specify what you want to create, right? So you say create table or create view, create database, whatever you want to create. But when you're using insert, you write insert into, what do you want to insert into? I want to insert into this guy here. So I copy my table name and put it there. So I say insert into department. So what do I want to insert into department? The values. So I have my department ID and department name. So I'll specify the values or the columns I want to insert into, then the values I want to insert into them. So what are my columns? I have depth ID and depth department name. So I have both. Then I will specify value. So for the values, my first department ID, maybe I want it to be 10. So I say 10. Then what is the department name? Let's say, so to specify string in SQL, you use a single apostrophe like this. Then you can say it like you can keep repeating values, or you can just say, okay, let me just use both styles. You can say values again, then another row. Let's call that reset. Then finally the last row. So I corrected my query. When you're inserting into and you want to put it on different, you don't want to put everything together. You can repeat the query this way, insert into the values, that's row 1, insert into, or you can go ahead and add another row. Instead of writing a million insert into, you can just put your values here this way and then put another value after this one. So let's say my next value is 30 and I want it to be marketing. So once I'm done with this, let's assume I'm only putting in 3 rows. I can put this semicolon here to show that this is the end of my query. It is a good practice, but I usually don't use it. But you can learn to use it. Once you're done with your query, put a semicolon to tell the system that this is the end of my query. So we have created our table. Let's comment that out. Then we can now run this part that inserts value into our table. Once this is done running, so we can see that the first row that we have here was executed as 1 row, and then these 2 together as 2 rows. So for us to be able to access this data that we have put into our department table, we have to select from that table. Like I mentioned, that your select statement is what you use always, every time when you're querying, when you're using SQL. So when we want to select everything, you can say select department name, like depth ID, and department name from department. You can mention just from department because we have selected the database we are using here. So when I do this and I run this, you see that I have my table. And like I told you, SQL is not case sensitive. I created this as big D and like in sentence case, but I could retrieve it in just lowercase. So you have your 10, 20, 30 that you have inserted. Now, when we talk about constraints, I will tell you why if I run this again, it's going to give me an error because of my primary key constraint. But to not make this video longer than it's supposed to be, let's continue. So now, if I thought that, okay, I made a mistake, department ID 20 is supposed to be R&D instead of research, and I want to change that, what am I supposed to do? So, called the update key. Sorry, I mean another command. I'm supposed to use another command called the update command. And what does the update command do? It allows you to change value, to update the value of a row or a particular item in your table. So if I want to use update, I will say update. I have written my query here. Sorry, I had to write it off camera because I'm a little bit slow with typing, especially on camera. Maybe I'm nervous. So I have set my table to R&D from research. And I said that I want it to change on department ID 20. So I have to use a condition, which is the where statement. So if I am not using a condition, let's see what happens to our table without a condition. So if I just say update department name to R&D and I run this, it's going to set all the values on my table to R&D because I did not state the condition to change that. So if I want to change this, I want to drop this table, which leads us to another statement, drop. So if I want to drop this table, if I use drop table, this statement is going to remove this table entirely from my database. I can't find anything, not the carcass, not the bones, everything will be removed. So we have drop table, and if I run this, command executed successfully. So if I come back here and I say execute, invalid object because I have removed that table. Now I have to recreate my table. Let's do that quickly. Recreate it and then insert into my table. So I can select from my table, and now I want to change research to R&D. I run this completely where department ID is 20. So that where allows you to change it for only 20. So when I execute this, you see that it is one row affected instead of 3 that we had before. And when I come back here to run, to select on my table, you see that 20 has been changed to R&D. There are other ways I could have removed those values from my table instead of using drop. So I could use another function called truncate. That's R. So this is the truncate statement. What do you want to truncate? I want to truncate the table department. So if I run this, it removes everything, every row on this table, but it still keeps my table structure. I can still select from that table. As you can see here, just that there's no department name, there's nothing under department ID. The table is empty back to when we newly created it without having inserted anything into the table. So that is what truncate does. And the last one I can do is to delete. So before I delete, I want to insert into my table again so that I can have values to delete from. Let's select to see that our values are there. Now I want to delete from my table. So this is my table and I want to delete from. Your delete statement can also use a where. So if I do delete directly like this, it will do the same thing as truncate. 3 rows have been affected. It will delete all the rows on my table. But let me insert again. So I've inserted the values again. If I want to delete from this table where the value is 10, that is, I don't want to delete everything on this table. I want to delete only where the value is 10. Then delete is very good for this case. So where depth ID is 10, delete from the table. So you see that one row has been affected. And if I select from this table again, you see that you only have 2 rows on the table instead of 3. Now I have used 3 different commands to remove data from my table. The first one is drop. The second one is truncate, while the third one is delete. What are the differences between these 3 commands and when should you use each command? Like I mentioned, this is a very common interview question. So let's dig into that. So like you must have noticed when we use the drop table command, we didn't add anything to it and it removed the entire table, both the column, names and everything. When we tried to select from it, there was nothing on the table. So that is what drop does. Drop allows you to remove everything from your table, everything from your database. You can't select anything from the table anymore. It removes the entire table, both the columns and the rows. But when you use truncate, truncate allows you to remove everything from your table, but still keep your table structure. So you still have your column name, but there will be no value inside the table. In case you want to be able to specify or give a condition of where to remove value from, then you use delete. Delete allows you to remove value from your table like truncate, but you can specify a condition with the where statement. So that is the difference between all three of these commands that allows you to remove values from your table. Now, there's another difference, and in terms of speed, drop is the fastest because you are not looking to see if a condition has been met or not. You just go and remove the table from the database. But truncate is faster. After drop, truncate is the one after it because it doesn't allow where condition which slows down your operation. For example, if you are doing it on a really large table, so truncate removes all the rows on the table, while delete allows you to put a condition. Delete can also remove all the rows, but if you know you want to remove all the rows, use truncate instead of delete. But if you have a condition to specify, then use delete and then specify the condition. Now, the other difference between truncate and delete is in identity tables. When you use truncate resets your identity, but delete continues where the last one ended. So let me show you again that difference in identity between truncate and delete. So I have this create table and insert into statement here. And if you look at the transaction ID column here, you see that I set it to identity. So I want this identity to start from 1 and to increment by 1. So whenever any value is being imputed, if it started from 1, it will say 1, then the next one will be 2, then the next one will be 3. But if I wanted to start from, let's say, 1,000, I can say start from 1,000 and increment by 10. So if I wanted to start from 1,000, depending on how large your table would be growing, you can imagine how fast this would grow, right? So the identity is like an auto increment ID. If you know that your ID is going to be an integer, instead of bothering your head about, what was the last number I used, you have to select the max and all of that. You can easily use an identity column. Now I want to use this as an example to tell you the difference between delete and truncate in terms of identity column. So let's run this. And when you put an identity column, you don't have to specify the value. As you can see that in the insert statement, I started with the transaction date and then the other columns. I don't have to put it. SQL will help me increment the value itself. So let's select from transaction. If you want to pick all the columns from a table, you use star. This allows you to pick all the columns instead of having to write the table name yourself. And I specified a DBO, that is the schema name. The schema name is like a folder in your database. So you can have like different folders in your database, and that's what your schema does. For example, if it's a very big organization and we have data for, like we have tables for different things, and in one database, I can say that, okay, this is, the schema name would be dashboards, then the table name, then another one, the schema name would be SSRS and the table name, depending on what you want to use the table to do. So you can create that schema to group them in the database. So let's select some transactions. Oh, sorry, I did not put my from. Select star from transactions. So we have it here. You see that I said my identity column to start from 1,000 and should increment by 10. So you see that it started from 1,000 and it incremented by 10. Now let's delete from this table, say delete from transaction. Because I'm not specifying a condition, it deletes everything from this table. So all 5 rows have been deleted. Now let's insert back into this table. That was 5 rows, right? And it ended at 1,050 or 1,040, starting from 1,000. So you see that when I inserted back into this table, it continued from where it ended the previous time, even though I have deleted from the table. So you can see that it is starting from 1050, 1060, 1070, that's 1050 up to 1090. So that's how delete works on the table. It doesn't forget the identity value that was placed in the table before. If I deleted with a condition and I'm coming back to add a new column, you will see that you could have, so let's say I said delete from where transaction ID equals to 10,090. So when I do this, it deletes one row and you see that 10,090 is no longer there. But if you come back here to add another column, if I come back here to add a new value or another row, instead of it to give me 10,090 back, you see that it goes to the next value. So 10,090 is no longer in our table because we have deleted it from our table. That's how delete works. Now let's compare it to truncate. So let's say truncate, I always forget my R, table, transaction. Truncate doesn't use where, so we say truncate table transactions. The table has been truncated, our rows has been removed. So when we select, we see that there's nothing on the table. And if we insert into truncate again and select, our identity value starts from 1000 again. No matter how many times you have used truncate, once you're inserting into your table again, it starts from the beginning of your identity value again. That is, it resets identity, but delete doesn't reset identity. Delete does not forget. It never forgets. So in this video, we have used different SQL commands based on different categories. We have used DDL and DML commands. We used create, we used update, we used truncate, which is a DDL command. We used drop. What else did we use? We also used insert into, and we learned how to put a condition on our query with the where statement. So that is all we have learned in this video. In the next video, I will talk quickly about column constraints before we go to using other. I hope you have learned something from this video. If you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, kindly click the subscribe button. It doesn't bite. And click on the notification bell so that whenever I drop a video, you'll be the first person to be reminded that another video has been dropped and it is time to learn. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.